As I finished up the first Jandek era, I was really happy to make it that far, but at the same time, I knew the best was yet to come. I knew I had an audience at that point, and I wondered which reviews they anticipated the most. Soon I'll be talking about the most popular albums with the general public, which is where all Jandek fans originate. Since those albums are like a rite of passage, they're widely discussed among both old and new fans. I dare say our opinions of those songs might be a tad predictable at this point. Meanwhile, Interstellar Discussion is a more challenging record that makes me think more deeply in the reviewing process. It's pretty well respected, and it does tread the delicate path between underrated and overrated, but I still think there's a lot to unpack here. At the very least, Jandek might have implied a connection with The Rock's Crumble, which features the same drum set on the cover, but in other respects, it's a little tricky to pair the two records. For starters, every track on Interstellar Discussion is new and unique, so you won't find any remakes or two-part songs. Unlike before, you'll also notice that less than half of the album actually consists of electric material, and it sort of begins where its predecessor left off. These opening tracks feature the same guitar tuning, but the songs are more experimental and distorted. Meanwhile, the strong acoustic collection introduces a new tuning, which is lower than ever. Even the album title is a departure. Starting with Chair Beside a Window, the earlier titles were derived from song lyrics that stood out to the artist himself. However, Interstellar Discussion is shrouded in secrecy, and unless you want to count Starless, the songs have nothing to say about it. Now that I think about it, I have theorized that Jandek isn't extraterrestrial, so maybe this title can be a new meme. I'll let you guys make that happen. Before you sample the opening tracks, keep in mind they basically complement each other. If you don't let them act that way, the experience will be incomplete. Some of them even flow right into each other on the LP. Give the whole package your undivided attention, and you'll notice several changes in volume and tempo, which adds a touch of progressive rock. The first three sections set the scene, so there's not a huge emphasis on lyrics. Appropriately, Jandek kicks it off with Starless by simply demanding that we listen. Right away, you'll notice that the instruments are more synchronized this time, so the punk influence is more pronounced. The next section is called Hey, and it's notable for having two vocal tracks. It's a welcome addition, even though the lyrics mostly consist of Hey. Up next is an instrumental jam with a joke name, followed by the harmonica-based Waltz in 2/4 time. If you know what a waltz is, you'll understand how contradictory that name is. Aside from that, it'd be hilarious to watch people dance to this music. As for the lyrics, I just want to ask, why can't Jandek let the guy wash his car? Anyway, the harmonica continues on Call You the Sun, which seems to be about someone whose personality changes as the sun rises and sets. Don't expect any specifics, though. Finally, I Ain't Got None is the grand finale of this bizarro Abbey Road medley. Jandek brings back the double vocal track, only to moan for a while. Meanwhile, Jandek tells off some lady who lost custody of her child, and makes it very clear that he doesn't have a replacement.
I have to tell you that I ain't got none!
I don't know how it relates to the previous sections, but once you hear the chaotic conclusion of this one, it really sounds like Jandek's point has been made. After turning off the amplifier, Jandek treats us to The Spirit, a song where he admires somebody's appearance as they wake up in the morning. This is another instance where I'm more familiar with the cover, which is a psychedelic version found on Down in a Mirror, a second tribute to Jandek. If it was a bit longer, it would make an excellent meditation soundtrack, but it's still worth buying as it is. Back on Interstellar Discussion, the next track is definitely a highlight. The longest song on the album, Rifle in the Closet, is also one of the darkest. Jandek has somehow fallen on hard times, and he seeks comfort from his friend. With lines like, "My life is a lie and I'm telling you the truth," he seems regretful of what he's been doing, and it's becoming impossible to enjoy little things like coffee and beer. Towards the end, Jandek hints that he's running away to Texas, and mentions a phone number where he can presumably be contacted. Maybe this was inspired by Tommy Two-Tone? Anyway, the most interesting part is the end, where Jandek assures us that the song itself is unrelated to rifles. I used to think that some of the lyrics were borderline suicidal, so maybe that title is his idea of a prank on his fans. Along with the powerful lyrics, I also like the guitar playing, which is a bit more dynamic than the typical acoustic track. Basically, Rifle in the Closet leaves nothing to be desired. Next up are two simpler songs, but they certainly don't act as filler. Sung features some clanky mid-paced guitar strumming, and the lyrics are actually about the song itself. It appears that Jandek had writer's block, so he just started ad-libbing for a minute and a half. Then there's Ha Ha, which brings back the deadpan laughter from comedy on Living in a Moon So Blue. Both the lyrics and harmonica playing have sort of a mocking tone. The most notable aspect is that it's the first Jandek song without guitar, which would still be rare for many years to come. If you're a fan of the album You Walk Alone, I'm sure you know that most of it consists of remakes of earlier songs, and the earliest can be found here on Interstellar Discussion. Customary is slightly puzzling, but I think it's about Jandek rejecting some lady whose behavior is too customary. Instrumentally, it's not too innovative, so I prefer the later version. Thankfully, Up Next is one of the highlights, and it's just fine as it is. In the same vein as the phone number we heard in another song, the title May 7th, 9:15 a.m. is strikingly precise, but it has some relevance to the lyrics. They discuss Jandek's strange natural high from bathing and going to the dry cleaners.
I take 3 baths a day, wash out my mind. Each time I get so gay, it takes me out of a bind.
Parallels can be drawn to Tiny Tim's similar tendencies. Apparently, the song also takes place on the narrator's birthday, but he doesn't let that interfere with his habits. At the end, it's suggested that there are other ways to have a clean day, so he is aware of all the time he's wasting. The last line mentions the month in the title and reveals a fondness for it. However, nothing in the song hints at the time, so we can only assume that these were the narrator's thoughts at 9:15 in the morning. Overall, I really enjoy this kind of track, since it reveals certain quirks about the artist, even if they might be made up. Not to mention, May 7th has always come to mind when I've thought of this album. Of course, you also can't forget about Kick, the most unsettling Jandek song at the time of its release. Unlike the stuff that sells, his music gives off uniquely depressing vibes due to the atonality and monotony. However, an emphasis on one over the other can quickly turn heads. Jandek fans are accustomed to a microtonal guitar tuning, but it's important that we hear all the strings, whether they're plucked or strummed. The final track of this album subverts all our expectations because much of it is played on the same string with the same note. Another note and some string bends can be heard in the second half, but since there's no singing there, newcomers are left wondering why the song's being dragged out this long. Surprisingly, Kick is not as shocking when it comes to lyrics. In fact, it's very coherent. A woman used to have an occasional glass of wine, but it evolved into an endless quest for the next high.
She's a thief, she's a harlot, you can take your pick. Gotta make the payment on another kick.
The narrator obviously isn't happy with this chain of events, but somehow it reminds him of a movie he saw. He knows she'll get her fix if she wants it enough. Her days are probably blending together so much that it's reminiscent of the monotonous guitar playing. If you want an especially vivid image for a Jandek song, just play this on repeat for a while. You'll feel like you're right in the middle of the opioid epidemic. In terms of complexity, this album certainly outdoes its predecessors. Structured differently than the ones on The Rocks Crumble, the electric songs do what the King Kong medley does for the Uncle Meat album by Frank Zappa. They give Interstellar Discussion an advantage since they leave less room for throwaway tracks. Speaking of which, there really aren't any. Since I've been rushing to finally post another review, a couple of songs weren't discussed, but I still recommend them. I even posted one of them a few years ago, even though it was no rifle in the closet. It's just a testament to the high standards of this album. When the music is not unique, it's just classic Jandek with all killer and no filler. At this point in the catalog, I'd rank it just below the first two records, and even 36 years later, I can't imagine it being outside the top 10. Even if interstellar discussion has nothing to do with space, it's certainly out of this world in terms of quality.